Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is David Hichens. David is a dairy farmer. He worked as a dairy farm manager for 7 years at a farm near Bristol, but since receiving his scholarship, he's now returned back to join the family grass-based dairy farm in West Cornwall. Here he's planning to grow his business and in particular is looking forward in the future to helping young people with their careers in farming. In his spare time, he can be seen, as many Cornishmen I suspect, in the sea and also riding his motocross bike. So can I welcome David? David's scholarship is supported by Anne and Alan Beckett.
Thank you. What does success in farming look like? And what does success mean to you? I'm David Hichens, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about my Nuffield experience, what I learned from those successful farmers I met around the world, and how I think we can help more young people to figure out what success is to them and how they might achieve it. I'd of course like to thank the Nuffield Farming Scholarship Trust, my amazing sponsors Alan and Anne Beckett, Joe Delves for his help and advice over the last 2 years, and anyone who's contributed to my scholarship on my way around. I grew up here, as we've heard, on the family dairy farm in West Cornwall. I was farming mad like many from a young age and went on to study agriculture at university. I worked as a dairy farm manager for several years near Bristol. But throughout this time, there was a desire in me to farm in my own right. Like many of us, we want to own the cows that we milk. There was also a pull back to the land that I grew up on. But throughout this time, I'd also noticed that whilst observing farmers around me, there were two very different groups. Quite often, we hear about dairy farming in the press in a negative way, that it's a lifelong sentence of hard work for quite often little financial return and not a lot of enjoyment or fulfillment. But I've been lucky enough to meet some from the other group. There are people that manage to make dairy farming not only look easy, but profitable and fun. So, if we're going to set out on our own farming journey, wouldn't we like to know how to end up on the right side of the fence? Now, as Mike Vacher and Anne Beckett know, my title took many turns, but effectively that word fulfilling was originally successful. But this poses some challenges. How do we define success? What does our successful farmer actually look like? And this might be what you're all conjuring up in your minds. But I'm not here to tell you whether this is or isn't success. What I'm saying is, if this is what it looks like, how did this person achieve that? And if this is what they're aiming for, how did they know what to aim for? So off I went on my Nuffield study tour, starting in Brazil at our Contemporary Scholars Conference, joining the India Global Focus programme, which enabled me to visit countries and businesses I would never have got to visit off my own back. I then chose English-speaking countries, as my subject is quite an emotive one, and did predominantly dairy visits, as that's the area of industry I wanted to influence. And it sounds silly now, but I quickly realised that success is obviously going to mean different things in different parts of the world. Different on a buffalo farm in India to a huge calf ranch in Texas, for example. And it means very different things to all the people I met throughout my journey and all the people who have influenced me. And it was after a visit to a dairy farmer in Australia called Paul Bethune that I was so struck by just how content Paul and his family were with what they had. And Paul persuaded me to think about success in terms of all aspects of life, not just the scale of our farming enterprises and how much money we've got in the bank. And I tried to work this into my subsequent visits, but I of course rocked up next to well-known dairy farmer in New Zealand, Colin Armour. And to Colin, scale and financial success is everything. This is what gives Colin and his wife Dale the freedom and the lifestyle to meet their personal goals. So again, I was a little bit confused as to what I was looking for. But it was actually New Zealand beef farmer and Kiwi tech fencing inventor Harry Weir that really threw me off course. And I think I'd got Harry's back up a bit even before my visit with my email to him about successful farmers, because it turns out Harry is quite passionate about this. And Harry feels that many what we call successful farmers are so at the cost of the planet and at the cost of our environment. And to Harry, success would be to achieve your goal. And if Harry had one goal, it would be to live without illusion. And here he was referring to the fact that many of us live successful, happy lives, but with a degree of naivety and ignorance to the damage we're doing to the planet. He would rather be comfortable and fully aware of what's going on around him. And this upset me a bit. He'd completely blown my findings so far out of the water. But as with many of these situations, after a few days of reflection, I realised just how valuable this had been. He had just cemented the fact that success really is achieving what you set out to achieve. But for me, it's achieving what you set out to achieve, but can't be at the cost of the environment, the people around us, our family, our employees, and for us dairy farmers, the welfare of our cows. So they'd all worked out where they were trying to get to, and they also excelled in several other areas. They might not have had a complete set of step-by-step guide of how to get to where they were trying to get to, but there was always an enormous amount of faith in themselves and faith that they would reach what they were aiming for. Many of them talked about doing the right thing in their guiding principles. And this sounds like a bit of a funny thing, because how do we know what the right thing is? But I think if we're all truly honest with ourselves when we're making decisions and putting things into action, we know what's morally right and when we're pushing the right or the wrong button. They'd all bitten off more than they could chew at some point in their journey. I thought you had to be pushed in at the deep end, but it turns out you can have the courage to jump in yourself. A New Zealand dairy farmer and LIC chairman Murray King said part of their business strategy had always been to bite off more than they can chew and to start chewing bloody hard. They all expressed superior business skills. They might not have been better at animal husbandry and crop husbandry than their neighbours, but they were better at numbers, at finance, at decision-making and communication. They're all very self-aware. They knew what sort of people and what skills they needed to employ to complement their own personality and skill set. They knew what backstops and guide rails needed to be put in place in order for the less desirable traits of their personality not to be able to affect a situation in a bad way. They talked about luck, but how did that luck present itself? In two ways. In chance opportunities that they grabbed with both hands and made the best of, and in chance meetings, which they cultivated into a relationship that benefited both parties. And there was always some hard work. And it was refreshing as a farmer to hear that a bit of hard work still goes a long way these days. Time is one of the most valuable resources at our disposal. Time is what helps build resilience, as it enables us to have the capacity to consume unexpected events without setback. And these successful people had managed to get control of time, as opposed to many dairy businesses that I know, where time is in control of them, and they bounce from one urgency to another on a daily and weekly basis. It's people that give us that time by spreading the workload. But in order to manage those people correctly, we of course need to have time to do it. So I feel that getting these two things right is one of the biggest things that lets these businesses not only appear calm and collected, but make it look easy. So there is no silver bullet to success. There's no blueprint to follow. But I feel the biggest thing we can do to enable more young people to reach their success is to help them develop personally. Many young people I can think of working in our industry barely have time to feed themselves properly, let alone think about where they want to be in 10 years' time or what their end goal is. We need to offer them the chance to self-reflect and evaluate what they've achieved in their situation so far. Through mentoring and support, we can help them to figure out what they're trying to achieve. And these are all terms like mentoring which are commonplace in other industries, but in agriculture we're still dragging behind slightly. Basically, we help them to reflect on their point A, which is today, what their point B looks like, what they're trying to get to, and we can create a tailor-made success journey for them to follow. So where are we now? I've had a lot of time to think about what my point A and point B looks like. And the challenge for me going forward will be at what point going down the success route and continuing an existing family farming business becomes a less viable option than starting from scratch with much less support and resource, but with a clean slate. And I challenge all of you to think about where you are now, but more importantly, where are those young people around us, in our farming communities and in our businesses? Who could we reach out to and tap on the shoulder and help to create a fulfilling life and career in farming? Thank you.